Auburn, California, above the fog and below the snow. The perfect place. Rural, steep cliffs, wooded areas, dirt roads. There are a lot of places to bury a body.
What were you doing that brought you here in 2003?
I was conditioning a horse to do endurance. That was Labor Day weekend, Saturday, that I came up on my normal training ride. Right about here,
Yeah.
I saw a freshly dug hole in the brush. The rest of my ride, I kept trying to justify why it was there.
It sort of haunted you, it sounds like.
It did.
We had just come home from our summer house up in the Sierras. I barbecued.
At dinner were Don and Lynette Vandershoot, their daughter Justine, and her boyfriend Danny. No one had any idea what nightmare was about to unfold after that meal.
I gave her a kiss on the forehead, said, "Good night, I love you."
I spoke to her on the phone. I told her that I loved her.
I was leaving for work at 5:30 in the morning.
Lynette walks into Justine's room. Justine is not there. The dog is on the bed, the front door is open, and her car is gone.
17 years old, disappears, leaves everything behind without trace. It felt sinister.
We're gonna find her. We searched and searched everywhere.
There were searches that the Vandershoots organized. And then there were searches that we did on our own with our search and rescue teams.
I try to imagine what it was like and what it's gonna be like when she comes back.
Danny and his roommate, Brandon, were on the sheriff's radar quickly.
Friends started to come forward about how jealous Danny was of Justine.
They were interviewed that first day. They said, oh no, we were home all night. There's a belief right away that they are concealing something about Justine's disappearance.
Okay, have a seat. Have you ever seen anyone die, Brandon?
Tone changes, story changes. He confesses.
Brandon claims that Danny killed Justine.
She's laying down and he's over her and his hands were not released. But
He explained that Danny was choking her and that he helped bury her.
Let's go.
At the end of the interview, Brandon led the investigators to the location of Justine's body.
Justine Vandershoot's body discovered buried in a shallow grave.
The Auburn Journal had a photo of just the brush where Justine had been buried, and I went, oh my gosh. I saw a freshly dug hole 3 days prior to her disappearance. I immediately, contacted the sheriff's department.
That was a big piece of evidence. That's absolutely cold-blooded, premeditated.
The Vandershoot family says they are relieved.
The decision was made to accept pleas to murder from both defendants and give them a life sentence.
Hopefully we can all move on from here.
No one would have ever imagined that 20 years later we would still be fighting for justice for Justine and her family. In 2020, Brandon Fernandez filed a petition to get out of his murder conviction. If Brandon's petition is granted, one of Justine's killers will walk free.
We're fighting for her. That's why we're here. She doesn't have a voice, so we're her voice.
It's 21 years since we've lost Justine, but it's still very fresh in our mind.
It was September 18th, 2003, when Justine Vandershoot's remains were discovered in a remote location more than 2 weeks after she disappeared. But it's here in this garden outside her bedroom window that her parents, Dawn and Lynette, still come to find her.
This is actually Justine's little
footprint
there.
Mementos of their youngest child and condolence flowers that poured in after her death are now permanently rooted here.
We call this Justine's garden.
At the center, a towering dogwood tree, a reminder of her favorite trips to the Sierra Mountains, and a sobering measure of how long she's been gone.
When we celebrated the 17th anniversary, Christine said she's been gone as long as she was here on Earth.
Justine's older sister, Christine, sums up what those years have been like for her in one word.
Lonely. She was my best friend. We were only 18 months apart. We did pretty much everything together since day one.
How would you describe Justine? What was her personality?
Vibrant, charismatic, just life of the party. She made you laugh every time she'd say something.
She was a spark in our household, that's for sure.
A little firecracker. Cheerleader, baseball, soccer. She was always on the go.
At 17, Justine was on the verge of graduating high school and wanted to pursue a career in fashion and beauty.
Did she know what she wanted to do in life after high school?
She would sew and design her own shirts and shoes. She had to stand out, and that was what she wanted to do for other people, was make them stand out and feel beautiful.
Instead, her family is now forced to grapple with her murder and its aftermath.
I don't ever want to forget about her, but I don't want to be reminded of what happened.
But it's not so easy to just pack it up and put it away, right?
No, it's not.
In fact, the Vandershoots say it remains an open wound thanks to ongoing efforts by Justine's convicted murderers, Danny Bessemer and Brandon Fernandez, to get out of prison. Retired Placer County Sheriff Ed Bonner.
Including parole hearings, I think the Vandershoots have been back to court 7 times in the last 7 years, always facing the possibility.
It's hard to imagine that both men were once welcome in the family's home. First came Brandon.
I believe it was probably 7th or 8th grade that I started to become friends with him.
A few years later, he introduced the Vandershoots to his friend Danny.
It was actually at a birthday party for me. We had a pool party, and Danny was actually coming to the house to meet me.
But it was Danny and Justine who clicked, and while she was only 15 and he was about 17, they quickly became serious.
From that party on, they were always together.
They even talked about perhaps getting married, is that right?
Yeah, they were very serious. He became kind of like a fixture in our family. His dad wasn't really in the picture, and he didn't really have a mom. So to come into our household and see how a real family was, I think that was something that he was attracted to as well.
The Vandershoots offered Danny the support and stability of a happy family life.
I considered him like a brother almost.
Dawn even got Danny his first real job working with him at an auto dealership and his own key to the house. But looking back, the Vandershoots now see red flags they didn't recognize then.
Controlling.
Telling her who she could see and who she couldn't, monitoring her texts and her cell phone calls. Her frustrations were really starting.
He was so jealous and very possessive over her. She couldn't go out and hang out with friends without him freaking out and getting upset and pouting.
Lindsay Morris was Brandon's girlfriend and says Justine confided in her about problems with Danny.
She even said, I don't know if I break up with him, if he'll ever really let me go.
Towards the end, she was trying to pursue certain things and he was trying to hold her back from. He didn't want anything to change.
And she was sort of growing up and maybe growing apart from him at that point.
Yes, I think so.
Retired Placer County Detective Angela Ford says Danny's fears of Justine leaving him reached a fever pitch in April of 2003 when Justine met someone during a spring break trip to Florida.
Justine had developed a friendship with a Navy sailor there at Pensacola.
Did she tell you about the man she met in Florida?
She did. She liked him. I think it kind of opened her eyes.
When Justine came back, she was definitely talking about this guy. and telling all of her friends about how amazing he was and how attractive he was and how she wished she could spend more time with him. Danny had gotten wind of this.
He thought he was losing her.
And they say Danny became consumed with the idea that Justine was cheating on him.
Danny had asked me, would I be willing to wear a wire so I can get her to confess this? He wanted the proof. I told him absolutely not.
And there was another troubling dynamic among Justine, Danny, and Brandon.
Once Justine came into the relationship, their friendship wasn't the same as it was before.
Justine believed Brandon was a serial cheater and a bad influence, so she gave Danny an ultimatum, him or her. Danny and Brandon lost touch for about a year, but by late 2002, they reconnected and decided to become roommates.
It was a triangle that was sort of toxic at that point.
Exactly. And it kind of really fueled when Danny and Brandon moved in together.
Justine continued to be a thorn in Brandon's side.
Brandon hated Justine with a passion, would constantly say that she was a whore and that she would manipulated Danny.
In 2003, a few days before Labor Day, Justine attended a party at Danny and Brandon's apartment.
We sat on the front porch just talking, and we both agreed that we were going to get rid of these guys and that we wanted a fresh start and that we could do better.
Justine was getting ready to go to the next stage. Danny was not going to allow it.
In the early morning hours of Tuesday, September 2nd, 2003, Lynette Vandershoot found her daughter's bedroom empty and her truck gone from their driveway.
This was so uncharacteristic of their daughter, so different from any behaviors in the past.
She has no money, no ATM, no credit card, no identification on her at all.
Justine's family frantically turned to the community for help.
I just want her home.
The Vandershoots, passionate, and they got organized.
This is my sister. She's been missing since Tuesday.
We went through all of Auburn, hanging the missing poster flyers, tying the pink ribbons around, because pink was her favorite color. Justine, we love you. We're all out looking for you. Please call us and let us know you're okay.
Pretty soon, everyone was looking for Justine.
Was Danny assisting in any of these search efforts in the beginning?
Danny showed up a number of times, and he would wear the T-shirts. He seemed really concerned.
She's been gone for 3 days now, and concern is growing.
The first break in the case came when Justine's truck was located at a park and ride about 5 miles from the Vandershoot home.
It was parked right here in this parking space.
And once we had that, then our belief was that, she was not far.
Matt Scribner was out riding his horse when he saw searchers gathered at the park and ride. Like many in the area, he had seen reports of Justine's disappearance.
I thought, well, they might be searching this area because at the time there was a direct access from the park and ride to this area.
A week earlier, he had seen a freshly dug hole along the trail, but as he rode through again this time.
Did you notice anything different?
The hole was not there anymore. There was debris over the top of it.
But the significance of that would not become clear until later.
I wasn't thinking like
Nobody
that.
thinks like that.
As the search continued, Placer County District Attorney Morgan Geyer says investigators considered the possibility that Justine had left the state.
The park and ride is located on a very busy interstate, Interstate 80, that runs the length of our country. We have a car that is locked and looks as if it was left intentionally. Did she meet someone there and jump on the freeway?
Danny had told detectives early on about the Navy man Justine had met in Florida.
Danny was actually one of the first people to say, well, maybe she's off in Florida because there's some guy she likes in Florida.
You have to assume everything's possible. Our detectives made contact with the Naval Intelligence Service. They tracked him down right away. Boom.
They did an extensive interview with him, and it was determined that he didn't have anything to do with her disappearance.
Danny, however, kept throwing that out there.
Danny told the media about a strange call he had received.
There's been an inquiry to my credit in Florida. Someone tried to get a credit card there, and I'm really hoping it's Justine.
They call tonight's vigil the Vigil of Hope.
Her loved ones clung to the hope that she was still alive and thought she was possibly being held against her will.
It's you guys that keep us going, all the support.
We're all gonna bring her home. We're gonna find her. She's gonna get away. She's a fighter.
Meanwhile, Danny appeared to be the distraught boyfriend on the local news.
2.5 years of my life have been devoted to that girl, and now that part of my life is gone.
Holding a photo of Justine and an engagement ring appraisal, he made his own plea.
She means more to me and her family than she does to you. And whoever it is needs to just let her go and let her come home.
But suspicion was growing around Danny, and friends were coming forward about his toxic relationship with Justine.
Danny's possessive. He's jealous. He's angry. He believes Justine is cheating on him. He's angrier. And all those things began to roll.
Detectives also began looking deeper into his relationship with Brandon.
As we interviewed more and more people, I find these guys were together. Generally what they did together.
By most accounts, Danny sort of looked up to Brandon. Brandon was known to be smart, somewhat cunning. He sort of had an edge to him.
They had some things in common, like juvenile brushes with the law.
Danny Bessemer had a history of thefts, burglaries, possession of stolen property. Brandon Fernandez had been prosecuted for essentially computer hacking.
For somebody who was a total geek, he was very, very confident in himself. Danny was more of a follower.
And detectives learned they shared a disturbing fixation with murder.
They talked about killing people. They talked about disposing of the bodies, beating polygraphs, well before the disappearance of Justine Vandershoot.
He had told me there's a couple spots where if I ever wanted to kill you, nobody would ever find you. This was something he had just said as a joke.
Brandon had created a website ranking levels of violence.
He had pictures of people dead, dying.
Things that give you chills up the back of your neck.
One of the levels discussed thinking about committing some form of violence, but not doing it. Another level talked about committing the violence contemplated on an animal. I mean, that's not normal behavior for a young man.
It is not normal behavior, and it is certainly consistent with those who find value and thrill in killing other human beings.
Investigators questioned Danny and Brandon throughout the investigation. Both of them said they had spent the evening alone together in their apartment.
The fact that each boy was the other's alibi is a red flag.
And that wasn't the only red flag. As detectives retraced Justine's last steps, they knew her cell phone shut off in the area where her truck was found. But then they found something very interesting.
They got the last 2 incoming phone calls to her on the night she was murdered. They were both from Brandon Fernandez.
As the search for Justine Vandershoot entered its 3rd week,
Day 15 that Justine Vandershoot has been missing.
There was no sign of the missing teen, alive or dead.
We had no body. We didn't have a lot.
Sheriff's detectives decided to up the ante. They enlisted the help of the FBI to interview Danny and Brandon again.
We needed to separate them, number one, but to have one roll on the other.
On September 17th, 2003, detectives questioned Danny Bessemer at Sheriff's headquarters.
Tell me why you didn't do it. Because I was sleeping.
The same afternoon, Detective Angela Ford and FBI agent Jeff Reineck and his partner drove Brandon Fernandez from his job to the FBI building in Sacramento.
Did he seem nervous? I mean, when the FBI shows up at your job and wants to talk to you.
He didn't seem nervous. He seemed like he had nothing to hide.
Brandon told the agents he had jet skied all day with coworkers, and after going home, He went out to run an errand because he wasn't feeling well.
I went down to get a V8 juice. I had the flu at this point.
He said he got pulled over for running a stop sign and accidentally called Justine twice.
Justine's cell phone is right next to my girlfriend's number.
He said he returned home and went to bed. Brandon said Danny had also been home after having dinner with the Vandershoots, but the agents were about to catch Brandon in a big lie.
Danny and Brandon first said, no, we were by ourselves. Well, no, it turns out that they weren't.
Sheriff's detectives had received a tip from Brandon's cousin, Clayton Cole. He told them that he and a friend had stayed at Brandon and Danny's place the night Justine went missing and saw them leave.
They knew that Danny and Brandon didn't come back until much later.
We're gonna play something to you.
What is this?
What Brandon didn't know is that the investigators had a recorded phone call.
After receiving that tip, detectives had asked Clayton to call Brandon and recorded the conversation.
I talked to my dad about this whole Justine thing, and I had to go to the cops today.
On the call, Brandon repeatedly told Clayton to lie to police and to say that Clayton and his friend weren't there that night.
And at that point, he knew. We had a lot more information.
With Brandon now rattled, Agent Reineck asked a key question.
Have you ever seen anyone die? Brandon.
Yes.
He went white.
Brandon broke and admitted he knew where Justine was. But first he said he needed protection from Danny.
Can you take me somewhere safe? Can you bring my girlfriend somewhere safe?
He wants to tell you a little bit more, but he's pointing it towards Danny.
It's all towards Danny. I had nothing to do with it.
He's scary intelligent. He has built everything in lies. He is a great actor. He's a monster.
Sorry. How long was it planned to hurt Justine?
Long. He had planned it forever, almost.
Brandon told them he knew Danny had tapped Justine's phone to catch her cheating and confront her.
I didn't know what was going to happen that night.
But Brandon insisted he had no idea Danny would seek revenge that night. He says as far as he knew, they were just going to meet up with Justine to steal marijuana plants from a farm. He now said those calls to Justine's phone were him trying to get hold of Danny to back out.
And Danny said, no, man, you need to come up here.
Brandon said he met up with Danny and Justine at the park and ride around midnight, and they got in his car with Danny giving directions. When he parked, he said Danny wanted to talk to Justine alone, so he walked away for a bit.
I went down this hill, and I was looking around, and I figured, oh, he's still up there for a while.
After a few minutes, he says he heard the car horn followed by a scream. He hurried back to find Danny had strangled Justine, his hands still around her neck, and a taser next to her lifeless body.
He looked at me, and he just was psycho. His eyes were just bulging out, and he was laughing. He was saying, I win, I win.
Brandon said those words were in reference to a song called The Game that Danny had playing on a loop in Brandon's car, a soundtrack to her murder.
The lyrics detail a girlfriend's infidelity and her ultimate murder by her boyfriend. And interspersed with that song are vignettes of Justine's own words as she's talking either to another boy or about another boy.
And some of the lyrics just excruciating. You always wanted people to remember you. Don't you know your wish is coming true today? Another victim dies tonight. The fear that she must have faced.
I can only imagine if you saw it in a movie, you probably wouldn't believe it.
Even though Brandon had initially said Justine was dead when he made it back up the hill, his story began to evolve.
What he was doing was slowly putting himself at the scene of the death.
Did you hear her exhale?
Yes. It was like a really screwed up breath. It like kept happening.
According to Brandon, she was still alive at that point. And also according to Brandon, she was already dead at that point. His own statements internally are inconsistent and demonstrate where he's trying to lie to get out of this.
Brandon said Danny removed her clothing and put her in a grave they dug that night and poured a liquid over her to decompose the body. He says he prayed for it to end.
I said, please just go.
You wanted her to die so it'd be over.
I thought she might have still been alive, but she was going to do something more brutal than she was.
He's watching her die.
And he's not helping her.
He's not helping her, no.
But Brandon said he was scared Danny would kill him too.
He made me bury her, and he made me promise and say that I was his brother, that I would never say anything. And he said he would kill himself or others. And then he had mentioned my girlfriend and Justine's family. He said he was going to take them out next.
After a 4.5-hour interview, Brandon agreed to take them to the scene.
It was about 9:30 at night.
So dark walking through this, I can only imagine.
When we first pulled up to come here, there was something shiny on the ground. It was a piece of her jewelry. It was 2 little cherries put together.
A few yards away, in a clearing among the trees, her grave lay hidden under an old mattress.
Danny? Yes. I'm Sergeant McConnell. I want to show this to you.
It wasn't long before detectives informed Danny, who said very little during his 6-hour interrogation, that they'd found the gravesite.
I just got back from there. Guess who took us there? And guess who he's blaming for the whole thing?
The next morning, a team of investigators digging through the hard clay dirt unearthed Justine Vandershoot's remains.
There's a relief, and then there's pain.
Danny and Brandon were both arrested and charged with Justine's murder. After 2.5 weeks, the search was finally over. But justice would prove elusive.
I drove home and I see the chaplain and I see detectives. My mom's crying and my dad said, "Your sister's not coming home." I passed out, literally.
And it's still hard to relive that moment.
Yeah.
On September 18th, 2003, Justine's family shared their heartbreak with the community.
I almost sensed Lynette just crumbling. And I put my hand on her shoulder. I just kind of propped her up. And we announced that this family's worst fears had come true.
Danny Bessemer and his roommate, Brandon Fernandez, were arrested Wednesday.
If the 2 gentlemen that are in custody now are responsible for this, they need to burn in hell.
Detectives interviewed Danny Bessemer again and told him they needed information about Brandon Fernandez's role in the murder.
Let's talk about Brandon, don't talk about Danny.
Believing Brandon has a deal with the FBI, Danny tried to haggle.
How can I get the same boat Brandon's in right now? I don't have the authority to let's make a deal, okay?
Ultimately, he broke down and started talking.
I really want to tell you everything I do.
Danny admitted he had started to strangle Justine, but then...
She said 4 words that just changed my mind. Those words were, "Danny, I love you."
But he said Brandon was the one who encouraged him to keep going.
He tells me it's too late now. It's already attempted murder.
Danny admitted he had poured drain cleaner over Justine's body, but said Brandon had poured it down her throat.
There was a black tarry substance on top of her. And then after the autopsy, there was a black tarry substance inside of her lungs.
Justine's official cause of death was listed as homicidal violence, but further testing suggested she had also ingested dirt.
There is no other way. To be that far down and into the bronchial canals means she inhaled it. She was alive.
Taking into consideration the family's wishes to avoid a painful, prolonged trial, prosecutors at the time offered a plea deal. As a condition of his plea agreement, Danny spoke with detectives again and gave new details about Brandon's role.
What was the story he started to tell?
Danny tells a story ultimately that involves Brandon as the mastermind. Brandon is claiming he is merely a victim of circumstance, and he panicked and participated in the cleanup and the getaway.
So we know the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
It really does. And Brandon does a pretty good job of incriminating Danny, and Danny does a pretty good job of incriminating Brandon.
In 2005, Danny Bessemer pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for a sentence of 25 years to life. Brandon Fernandez pleaded to second-degree murder and received 15 years to life.
A piece of justice was served. At least we can put some of this behind us.
Part of their plan was to receive a life sentence that allowed them to at least become eligible for parole and maybe have a chance someday.
Justine's family made it their mission to ensure that would never happen. Brandon Fernandez came up for parole in 2017 and was denied.
Every time they get denied, that's justice for her.
The family breathed a sigh of relief, but their lives would soon be upended once again.
In 2018, California changed the law of murder. In 2020, Brandon Fernandez filed a petition to get out of his murder conviction based on the new law.
The new law reduced the fault of defendants who didn't actually do the killing, like a getaway driver. Brandon wanted to have his life sentence for second-degree murder thrown out and to be resentenced as an accessory after the fact.
He still has not taken any responsibility. He's guilty just as much as Danny.
Brandon's defense attorney, Steve DeFilippis, maintains his client was only guilty of being taken in by Danny's schemes.
Clearly, Brandon was in the wrong. He shouldn't have participated in the cover-up of this, and that's what he did. And absolutely, he should be convicted of that, but shouldn't be held responsible for a murder.
A judge presiding over the resentencing case in 2020 denied Brandon's motion, but that ruling was reversed by the Court of Appeals and sent back due to yet another shift in the legal standard. Both sides would now have to fight it out in court in an evidentiary hearing.
We had to call all of the witnesses and we had to prove Mr. Fernandez's guilt.
The district attorney has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the judge has to make findings beyond a reasonable doubt.
In May 2024, it would be up to Deputy DA Tim Wirtz to prove that Brandon Fernandez helped plan and carry out Justine's murder.
Once they started kicking this idea around, they built off each other.
His key witness was Danny Bessemer, who over several days testified how he and Brandon Fernandez were two pillars in the plot to lure Justine to her death.
Danny talks about how he doesn't want to let Brandon down when they're out there digging the grave, and Brandon says, "This better not be for nothing."
Danny described how he and Brandon assumed different responsibilities.
Danny was going to kill her, and Brandon was going to be involved into the cover-up side of things, the forensics as he described it. Brandon purchased the chemicals that were poured over Justine.
According to Danny, he and Brandon pre-dug the grave over several days.
The last time they go to the grave before they bring Justine there is that Mondays during the day to check it out in the light and possibly do some digging.
And Danny says Brandon provided the tools used to dig, including a pickaxe he took from his parents' house.
After they kill Justine and bury her, they throw them over the fence at Brandon's parents' house, and the police go and corroborate that.
The prosecution says it found other evidence at Brandon's workplace that he never mentioned, like pieces of the recording device used to tap Justine's phone, and in his shredder, a receipt for a brand new set of tires.
He was already covering his tracks
the day after.
What we call in the prosecution world, consciousness of guilt.
Brandon's defense attorney insists Brandon was only trying to hide his role in the cover-up, not the murder. And he says that relying on Danny Bessemer's testimony is a sign of the prosecution's desperation.
They don't have a case.
I often wonder, will I ever get 100% of the truth? I don't think we ever will.
You think he's still a danger?
Yes, definitely.
Brandon's defense attorney, Steve DeFilippis, says Danny Bessemer is the real danger. and points out it was Danny who broke bread with Justine's family, knowing he was going to kill her that night.
This is a Ted Bundy in the making. Somebody who has no conscience, somebody who has no empathy for other people, basically a psychopath.
And he argues Danny will say anything in court to improve his chances of being paroled.
He wants everything to look like Brandon made him do this. He's at that point told either 4 or 5 different stories about what happened.
In his cross-examination, DeFilippis picks apart inconsistencies in Danny's statements about Brandon's involvement.
You can't corroborate any of his story, and that's deliberately done by him because he knows that it can't be refuted.
In fact, he argues that the evidence contradicts Danny's story. For one thing, he says if Brandon was really in charge of forensics, he wouldn't leave a trail of evidence.
The guy who is in charge of forensics is not going to do any of the things that Brandon did. Brandon takes the shovel and leaves it at his parents' home. Why would you put something involved in the homicide at your parents' home? Why would you drive your car up to the scene knowing that you're going to leave tire tracks on the dirt? You wouldn't do that.
And another discrepancy, Danny's claim that he and Brandon poured drain cleaner on Justine doesn't match the autopsy findings. Instead, those results indicate she ingested methanol, a toxic chemical compound found in a variety of products, but not drain cleaners. But Tim Wirtz counters that Danny has no reason to lie about that.
I don't know what theory under which the parole board might look favorably upon Drano, but unfavorably upon methanol being poured on her. The only explanation is that he's honestly mistaken, and the only way he'd be mistaken is if he wasn't the one that bought it.
And DeFilippis says Brandon has an alibi for that Monday afternoon before the murder, when Danny claims they went to the gravesite.
We know that Brandon was up at the lake that day.
Wirtz points out there was a 2-hour window when Brandon left to pick up tools to fix a broken jet ski.
It's just not an alibi. There's plenty of time for him to have done what he said.
DeFilippis says the timing still doesn't match up with Danny's story.
Danny also said that the digging was later in the day. It was not in the morning time, which is when Brandon got the tools and went back.
But the prosecution argues that the defense can't get around Matt Scribner's testimony that he saw a freshly dug hole 3 days prior to the murder, which is consistent with Danny's account of digging the grave over several days.
This wasn't a panicked dig that they did at the last minute where Brandon's terrified for his life. The way it actually pans out, Brandon is given immense power. Brandon knows where the body is.
After more than 2 weeks of testimony, the judge gets the case. If Brandon's motion is granted, he will walk free. It's a familiar fear for the Vandershoots.
The hand shaking, just trying to get ready,
Absolutely.
just brings the emotions up all over again.
You don't know what to expect.
On August 1st, 2024, before a courtroom packed with the Vandershoots and their supporters, as well as Brandon Fernandez, who appeared via video conference, and his parents, the judge issued his ruling.
Was there a palpable concern for the Vandershoots that one of their daughter's murders could go free?
That fear, that concern, you could cut it with a knife.
Cameras were allowed in court, but we were not allowed to record audio. The judge denied Brandon Fernandez's motion and upheld his conviction.
So I was very nervous. I let out a big sigh as soon as he said it, so it was just, yay, feels really good. Some justice.
Justice for Justine again. He did not get out. Very relieved.
The judge said it was difficult to parse the truth from lies told by both Danny and Brandon, but he says ultimately it was evident Brandon was in on the murder plot and easily led investigators to Justine's body through rugged terrain in the dark.
Brandon brought you here and pinpointed exactly. I mean, he knew exactly where it was.
He did. He gave us instructions and even said you wouldn't find it on your own.
The ruling is a big win for the Vandershoots, but only temporary relief.
In 2 years, we've got 2 more parole hearings coming up.
We're not going away. We're never giving up.
I'll be there with my cane. I think this one right here is my favorite.
They're critical of evolving laws that have allowed Brandon Fernandez to keep relitigating his role in Justine's murder.
I kind of like feel at times we've been on pause. We really haven't been able to move forward because we have to relive it.
In issuing his ruling, the judge acknowledged that the legal system can seem unfair to the victims' families and to survivors.
I wholeheartedly agree. Oftentimes it feels as if the only rights we are trying to respect are those of the convicted and the guilty and not grieving family members. That underlies the problems with this law because it decreases people's faith in the system, that there's finality.
It's something the Vandershoots are trying to change by advocating for victims' rights.
We're trying to do everything we can to prevent this happening to somebody else's family.
They also partnered with the Placer County DA to sponsor new state legislation. Justine's Law, as it's called, passed in 2023 and provides teen dating violence prevention education in high schools throughout California.
What do you want Justine's legacy to be now?
To help educate other boys and girls, even if it saves one life, it's worth everything.
Matt Scribner says he can't ride through these trails without thinking of Justine.
In one aspect, it's quiet. They've cleaned the area up. It's beautiful.
In some ways, it's almost like Justine is shining here.
I believe that.
We think of her as hummingbirds come to us. A lot of times when we're back here working in their garden, I'll have a little hummingbird. She'll come right up to my face and I'll talk to her, and I think of her as she's saying hi to me.
You've probably heard of the NCIS from the hit TV series, but we're about to take you inside its real-life work. Listen to 48 Hours NCIS early and ad-free on the 48 Hours Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts.
My dad passed away in 2013. His last words to me were, "Whatever it takes, you protect your mom and you fight to keep Steve in prison."
Katina Salerno was only 18 years old when she was shot in the head and killed by her boyfriend.
With the flash of a gun, my whole world just got turned upside down.
Stephen Burns was convicted of murdering Katina Salerno in 1979.
He just looks dangerous. It's like a killer face. If you looked at his eyes, there is nothing behind him. He has no soul. My name is Nina Salerno, and I am the sister of Katina. Stephen Burns was sentenced to 17 years to life. In 1990, after just 10 years, Stephen Burns came up for parole. My parents, my sister Regina, myself, and friends and family traveled to Vacaville State Prison to protest his release.
As a father, I closed her casket and buried my 18-year-old child who was murdered by this animal. This is a body bag of my daughter. This is what you did to her, Steve.
46 years since Katina's death has not diminished 1 ounce of that pain. Where are we going? We are heading to the San Joaquin County District Attorney's office.
I am shaky.
Very shaky.
You are right now?
Yeah.
How many parole hearings have you
This will
attended?
be number 13.
You've been at every single one of these? Yes, every single one. As Steve Burns heads into his 13th parole hearing, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that he's no longer a risk to commit the kind of crime he committed coming into prison. I've known Steve Burns for over 2 decades.
You don't think he's a danger?
I don't think he's a serious danger if he were to be released.
If somebody looked at this and said, it's been 45 years, is this now just about vengeance? No, it's not. Keeping Steve in jail is not about vengeance. For me, it's fear. fear for my family.
I think he has a very good chance of being found suitable.
Isn't it likely at one of these hearings, he's gonna get out?
That's my biggest fear, is him getting out.
It shook the entire campus at the University of the Pacific. A freshman on her first day of college in 1979, found unconscious, bleeding from her head in a remote area of the school. Her name was Katina Salerno. Harriet and Mike Salerno were getting ready for bed when the phone rang at their San Francisco home. Mike answered it. His tone signaled the news.
And I said, what's wrong? He says, Katina's been shot, and she's in the emergency room.
The Salerno's two younger daughters, Regina and Nina, rushed to their side. Then the phone rang again.
And they said, your daughter passed away.
I don't think it can be described in words, what it's like to watch your mom collapse crying. My dad, a very, very strong man, but you could tell he was shaken to the core.
And life just stopped. Life stopped. Completely stopped.
You got the keys to the car?
Yeah.
48 Hours first met the Salerno family in 1990. Harriet and Mike were making their weekly visit to Katina's resting place.
I think coming out here and being able to talk to Katina gives me a peace of mind also that I can still communicate with my daughter, that it isn't the final end.
At the time, Katina had been gone for 10 years, and her family was just embarking on a decades-long journey to keep her killer behind bars.
It's the first skirmish in a long, long battle that we started today.
It was not a journey they had ever expected to make. Harriet, did you and Michael really have kind of the perfect life as parents, 3 kids?
Yes. To answer you, yes, we were so blessed.
Both Mike and Harriet were juvenile commissioners assigned by the city of San Francisco to mentor boys and girls. Their arms and home were always open, says Nina, the youngest daughter.
I think the best way to describe it is it typified a middle-class American family that valued their faith, valued family, valued community as well.
They spent blissful summer days at the cabin in the mountains. 3 carefree sisters, with Katina leading the pack, says Regina, younger by 18 months. She was the heart and soul of the family. She had such a good heart. She loved being the older sister.
I think the best way to describe Katina is she is that person every person should meet in their life. She just brought an air of kindness.
When Katina was 14, a new family, the Burns, moved in across the street in San Francisco. There were 4 children, a girl and 3 boys, all about the same age as the Salerno sisters. And we were spying on them, so we all made a big batch of cookies, giggled all the way across the street, knocked on the door, introduced ourselves, and gave them a batch of homemade cookies. Soon, the friendship between the oldest Salerno sister and the second oldest Burns brother
blossomed into a young love. Katina and Stephen Burns started dating in the 10th grade.
How would you describe Stephen Burns?
Well, he was the big brother I never had, you know, and for me, it was like, God, I have a big brother, and I just thought he was great because we got to go to the football games.
Steve, who went to an all-boys Catholic school, was a star athlete and captain of the football team. He and Nina, a basketball and volleyball player, bonded over their shared love of sports.
I love Steve. I idolized him. He was a great athlete. He coached my teams. He would help me with my shot, and he took the time to do that.
Mike took Steve, who had a difficult relationship with his own dad, under his wing. He not only mentored him, he gave him a job at his TV store delivering TVs.
And my dad, who embraces everybody, brought him in and treated him as a son.
Mike trusted him completely, says Regina. They all did.
Did you ever see anything that between Steve and Katina that worried you?
I have to tell you, I've given hours and hours of thought of that. Why didn't I see this? What was it?
You sometimes are close to people. You don't always see little signs or you ignore them.
But with hindsight, the sisters say, there were signs. In her senior year, Katina, who had been accepted to the University of the Pacific, wanted to break up with Stephen. But he wasn't having it, says Regina. He started threatening her.
She said that Steve said that if I broke up with him, he would kill me.
But at the time, neither sister took him seriously.
Neither one of you told your parents.
We just figured he was just saying it, and because of what our relationship was over the years, why would we believe that? He enjoyed being part of the family. Why would he destroy a family that he loved?
Mike and Harriet never heard about that incident. Never imagined that the life they knew would come to an end.
We thought we were doing good and everything would be fine, and never thought the boy across the street would murder our daughter.
When Katina arrived at the University of the Pacific, UOP, in September of 1979, she thought she had left Stephen Burns behind for good. He said he was going to Santa Clara University, and she was going to begin pursuing her longtime goal.
She knew she was going to become a dentist. She knew exactly what she was going to do. It was planned for her. That was her goal, her dream.
But Katina's excitement was cut short soon after the Salernos got to campus.
We were staying overnight, and we went to the hotel lobby, and then all of a sudden there's Steve and his sister and family. And we're like, what are you doing here? And he says, well, I'm going to UOP.
That's really the first time I heard a lot of panic in her voice, because that just caught her off guard.
For the first time, Katina turned to her father for help.
My dad walked up to him and said, okay, Steve, leave Katina alone. She has told you that. You guys move on to your own ways, be friends, and know that I will always be here for you.
The Salernos headed back to San Francisco, and Katina and Steve each moved into their respective dorm rooms on opposite sides of the campus. Stephen's new roommate, Les Serpa, remembers walking in the room and seeing Katina's picture everywhere.
He said his girlfriend was at Pacific as well. There were pictures of her and him together. More pictures than I had ever seen before, but they were everywhere on his desk.
He didn't mention that she had wanted to break up?
Not at all. It was all very positive. Everything was great.
Across campus, Katina was settling in with her new roommate, Joanne Marks. Then came a knock on the door. It was Steve Burns.
After he left, Katina told me that he wanted to meet with her later in the evening for the last time. She was not looking forward to meeting with him, but she was looking forward to it being the last time. She believed that he would stop bothering her.
Joanne says Steve came by to pick up Katina about 7:45 that evening.
I said something like, have a good evening, and he kind of just grunted.
Katina told Joanne she would see her later, but that later never came.
I think it was probably close to here.
A freshman out for a walk named Kevin Arlen would be the one to discover why. It was around 9:45 at night when he saw something on the sidewalk.
And I kept walking and realized that's a person. And figured I needed to go get some help.
Kevin, unnerved by what he saw, rushed back to his dorm and got a resident advisor. They both ran back to the scene.
And we got up to her, and it was a young lady that was laying on the ground, and she was still alive. She was unconscious, but there was a big pool of blood around her head.
Kevin would later find out it was 18-year-old Katina Rose Salerno. She had been shot in the back of the head.
Her arms were twisted in a way that I never thought the human body could twist.
Do you remember her face?
I just remember the blood.
That had to be heartbreaking.
Yeah, I knew it was tragic. I knew it was very serious, a very serious injury.
While the two men waited for the ambulance to arrive, Stephen Burns returned to his dorm room, where his roommate Les was watching Monday Night Football.
He went and laid on the bed, propped up a pillow, and started watching the game.
Did he seem nervous at all?
He was not nervous at all.
The ambulance arrived around 10 p.m. and rushed Katina to St. Joseph's Hospital. She was still alive, barely. Years later, her family would learn she was not alone. Randy Haight, at the time a young patrol officer who was at the crime scene, met his partner at the hospital.
I said, "Where's the family?" And he says, "She's a student at UOP from out of town. They're not here." I said, "Is anybody with her?" He says, "Haven't seen anybody. It's just us."
Katina Rose was pronounced dead at 9 minutes after midnight.
We made the decision to sit with Katina until the coroners came. Even though she had passed, I just didn't feel right leaving her alone. I prayed. I said a prayer for her.
By then, homicide detectives were at Katina's dorm talking to Joanne.
I told the police that Katina had been picked up by Steve Burns, and I told them which dorm he was from.
Les and Stephen were in their room when there was a knock on the door.
I opened the door, and there's like 5 guys out there in suits. So I stepped out a little bit, say hello, and I could see at the end of each hall was full of police officers. And then they asked to search our room. They went through everything, every bag, every drawer, everything.
What were they looking for?
I didn't know at the time, but later I learned they were looking for a weapon, for a gun.
Stephen Burns was pulled from the room and taken to the Stockton police station, where he was fingerprinted and photographed. Officer Haight recalls seeing him there.
He did not appear to be upset in any way.
Burns told the police he didn't meet Katina on campus that night, and that he spent the evening in his dorm room watching Monday Night Football. Without the gun, it was never found. The police didn't have enough evidence to hold him. Stephen Burns was released. His father took him back to San Francisco. The police didn't publicly name a suspect, but Harriet Salerno didn't need a name. She already knew it.
I just said to Mike, "It's Steve, Mike. It's Steve." I don't know why. I just had that feeling.
After talking to the family, the police learned that Stephen had threatened to kill Katina if she broke up with him. 2 days after the murder of Katina Rose Salerno, Stephen Burns was arrested at his home just across the street from where Katina grew up.
I remember sitting up in the window, watching them walk him out in handcuffs and putting him in the patrol car. My whole world got taken from me. And really, the flash of a gun. I mean, everything was gone.
Learning to live without their daughter has been a lifelong journey for Katina's parents. One crippled by what ifs, Mike Salerno never stopped blaming himself.
He felt that as a father, he let her down.
For decades, Katina's sisters have also grappled with regret, wishing they had told their parents about Stephen Burns threatening to kill Katina.
What if I had said something? What if we told them about the threat?
You're living with guilt, too.
And it doesn't change after 40 years. That's the hole in my heart for missing my sister and what we could have had together.
In the wake of the murder, each member of the family retreated into their own private grief.
I didn't even care if I even lived. I wanted to join Katina.
I didn't know what to do anymore. My whole plan, my whole world, my whole bubble blew up.
I mean, I never felt that kind of hurt. I lost my entire family because they fell apart. It was painful enough that my sister had been murdered, but the person that I viewed as a brother and loved betrayed me by taking her life.
The Salernos would learn that the young man they had trusted had stolen a gun from Mike's store weeks before Katina's murder. You believe he planned that murder?
Oh,
yes.
Absolutely. The fact that he stole the gun prior, there was no reason for the stealing of the gun otherwise.
They came to believe Stephen may have been planning to use that gun to kill Katina even before she left for college.
The night before we took her to UOP, I heard this noise outside. And it was Steve Burns pacing in front of the bedroom window. He had a big white towel wrapped around his left hand.
Regina says Burns tried to climb up the side of their house and enter through the window of the bedroom the girls shared, but Katina told him to leave.
And she said, "No, I'm not opening the window. Go to bed, Steve. I'm going to school tomorrow. Stop, just stop, just stop."
Then there was a sound like he fell, and it was a very distinct sound of metal hitting metal.
What do you think now, when you look back on that sound of metal against metal?
I think if I had opened the window and he got in, there'd be 3 dead girls.
You think he had a gun with him then?
Absolutely.
6 months after Katina's death, 19-year-old Stephen Burns went on trial for her murder. It was a bitter awakening for the Salernos, who say there was more concern for the defendant and his rights than there was for his victim. Neither of Katina's parents were allowed in the courtroom, not even while Nina, who was only 14 years old at the time, took the stand. She had to testify at the trial on her own, without a victim's advocate to support her. What was that like on the stand?
Ugh. I think the best word was just awful. I was in a courtroom. The only person I knew in the courtroom was the guy that had murdered my sister.
The prosecution argued that Burns met Katina that night, carrying the stolen gun, with the intention of killing her if she wouldn't continue their relationship. Still, the jury did not convict him of premeditated first-degree murder. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and was sentenced to 17 years to life with the possibility of parole.
We all thought 17 years to life meant life, that they would never let him out.
He should be in prison the rest of his life.
They would learn they were wrong. Just 10 years into his sentence, Stephen Burns came up for parole. The Salernos were outraged.
I had no idea the parole system was so rotten.
Here they are in 1990, talking to then 48 Hours correspondent Bernard Goldberg the night before the first parole hearing.
Okay, Stephen Burns was handed down a 17 to life sentence.
That's
and
right.
Here we are 10 years later.
That's right.
But you don't want him out after 17 years, after 20 years, after 25. Is that fair?
Oh, that's a very fair question. Absolutely, I don't want him out. But I don't even want to go up there before 17 years because that's what I was told.
Going into this hearing, they know there's a chance he could get out. On March 28, 1990, the Salernos and a bus full of supporters headed to Stephen Burns' parole hearing.
That bus ride was the longest ride in my life. First hardest thing was when she died. This is the second.
For the first time since Katina's murder, the Salernos confronted the man they had once considered part of the family.
Steve sentenced my daughter to death forever. I ask for a fair trade. I ask you to sentence Steve to life in prison.
Then it was Burns' turn to speak.
It's hard to say in words how difficult it is to live day to day about the feelings I have inside about what I did. And regardless of what I do, I can't bring Katina back. But I know this, that I am deeply sorry for what I did. And I will work each day of my life, whether it be in prison or outside, to make up.
He apologized, but the Salernos noticed he never looked at them while he did it.
If you can't look at someone in the face and say you're sorry, then you know damn well no one's sorry.
After an excruciating wait,
The board is deliberating right now.
We don't know what those commissioners are thinking.
the parole board came back with a decision. Stephen Burns was found unsuitable for release, but he would get another chance at freedom in 2 years.
2 years, we got 2 years, and I feel very, very drained, and I know my family's so worn out.
2 years? What about the Salerno family?
We'll be back.
And back they would come over and over again for the next 35 years. There is one thing you can count on with the Salernos. Every week for almost 46 years,
You all right?
they've gone to the cemetery where Katina now rests.
I'm gonna get the water out of the flowers.
These days, there's another grave to tend. Mike Salerno died in 2013 of cancer. There's something else you could be sure of. Every time Stephen Burns comes up for parole, they will be there.
Thank you for the strength that you impart on all of us, and as we face this next parole hearing, we all said we would be back, and we've continued to be back 12 times. Not just because he murdered Katina, but because he is a dangerous murderer that will kill or harm again, and that's just the bottom line.
In January 2025, they were about to go to their 13th parole hearing.
Give this family the strength to continue to fight.
That fight for victims' rights has shaped all of their lives.
Was I going to be a nurse 40 years ago? No, and now I am. The reason why I did it is because I swore nobody would die alone.
Nina was so traumatized by the trial, she vowed she would become a prosecutor. And so she did. She became a specialist in domestic violence cases.
I believed, like my sister, so many victims are either not heard, afraid to be heard, or just don't understand the magnitude of what's happening to them.
She became the DA in Modoc County. Cowboy country, about as far north in California as you can get.
being able to be out in the mountains or work on a cattle ranch or ride my horses and have that time is just, it's who I am.
Harriet went on to start Crime Victims United, an organization that has changed hundreds of laws. Before Harriet Salerno, victims in California weren't allowed to give impact statements at sentencing. Now they are. Parents, even if witnesses, can now attend the trial. And children, unlike Nina, must now be accompanied by a support person when testifying.
She's my hero. I mean, absolute hero. And it's just so significant to see how she supports people and just really fights for what's right.
I have a passion.
For Harriet, that has meant fighting to keep Stephen Burns behind bars.
Been doing it for 45 years, and I will continue to do it as long as I'm alive and as long as he's in prison.
Stephen Burns has been in prison for 45 years, but the Salernos are convinced he hasn't changed.
He still has yet to admit to the facts of the crime.
Stephen Burns' story, says Deputy District Attorney Robert Himmelblau, has changed at least 12 times over the years.
He had said repeatedly that Katina pulled the gun, that Katina was the one who had the revolver, ignoring the fact that we knew that he had stolen Katina's father's revolver. Sometimes she shot him. Sometimes they struggled over the gun and it accidentally went off.
In 2016, 37 years after the murder, Stephen finally stopped lying about Katina's actions, says Nina. He told the commissioners, quote, "I became very, very angry, and I pulled out a gun and shot Katina." But Stephen continued to deny that he stalked her to UOP to kill her if she didn't get back together with him.
The shooting of the gun murdered my sister, but the behaviors and the need for his power and control and the obsessiveness is what makes him dangerous.
And according to a complaint brought up at the last parole hearing, he has shown those same obsessive behaviors inside prison. A professor who taught incarcerated students reported that Burns' behavior towards her was, quote, disturbing and manipulating.
He was relentless towards her because she would not allow him into a class. He focused on her and was not going to stop till he got what he wanted.
Do you think that if Stephen Burns is released, he could hurt someone?
Yes, the next woman he goes out with, who says no.
But there are some who believe that Stephen Burns deserves a second chance. Kevin Anderson, once a respected pediatrician, got to know Burns when he was incarcerated, also for murder. After 24 years in prison, Kevin was released on parole in 2023. He started working as a counselor. We first spoke to him the day before Stephen's 2025 parole hearing.
Do you think that Stephen Burns is a danger to society?
I can't say 100%, but I do think that Stephen Burns has done a lot of the work to get to that point where you're no longer a danger to society.
Stephen has earned a college degree and has worked with hospice patients. He has participated in numerous anger management and rehabilitation programs, some alongside Kevin.
I think that he has the tools now that he didn't have before.
Kevin worked with Steve in mock hearing sessions to help him prepare for the upcoming parole hearing.
We had to push him. And once we got him to get off of the denial on certain issues where the real honesty had to come out, now he's able to talk about it in the honest terms that maybe he wasn't able to do 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Kevin says Stephen told him he snapped when Katina rejected him.
She said, "I want you to stay away from me and my family." And he said, at that point, I just lost it. And as he was describing this, he was crying because now he realizes where he was going with this and what this was leading to.
And Katina saw it too, says Kevin.
He described to me her body language, what her eyes were doing, how they had just grown really big. I said, what else? And he said, her voice was shaking. And I said, and what did that mean to you? And he would say, it meant she was scared to death.
But it didn't stop him. Stephen Burns shot the woman he claimed to love in the back of the head and walked away, leaving her to slowly bleed to death.
Did he say why he left and didn't get help for her?
He did say that what he did afterwards was a very cowardly act.
Stephen Burns is about to get another chance to convince commissioners that the same man who left Katina to die that night is a changed man. And this time, the Salernos fear the odds are in his favor.
It scares the living daylights out of me having him come out.
As Harriet Salerno counts down the days to the 2025 hearing, she does what she's done for the past 4 decades. She goes to work. At 92, Harriet still goes to the office at Crime Victims United every day.
We're going to use these at the parole hearing.
Harriet and Nina are picking out photos to show the commissioners at the parole hearing.
And here's Katina. I think that's her 16th. It's important that they understand that she was a beautiful human being. Her dog was very important to her, and her life was taken for no reason.
Nina has been preparing for this hearing for months.
And in here, I keep everything from the trial to all those subsequent parole hearings.
Nina, the prosecutor, is leaving nothing to chance.
Like here's transcripts for the 2010 hearing.
But Nina, the protector, is calling on Katina and her dad to help the things she can't control. As a DA, Nina knows his chances of getting out are better than ever. Keith Watley is founder of Uncommon Law, an organization that helps incarcerated people navigate the parole process.
From what I've seen so far on paper in terms of the time he's done, the program that he's put together for himself and how well he's performed there, he does seem like somebody who, under the law, should be granted parole.
Watley, who has never met Stephen, but has reviewed his last 2 parole transcripts, says Stephen has 2 other important things going for him. His age, he was only 18 when he committed the crime.
California has passed laws to say that we have to consider someone's youth at the time of the crime. None of us are fully developed in the brain before we're age 25.
And his age at the time of the hearing, 63. Watley says he's eligible for special consideration under the elderly parole program. He says people simply age out of crime, especially violent crime.
But in Stephen Burns' case, isn't there a possibility that if he gets out, he gets involved with someone and they leave him, he'll do the same thing?
It's a great question. It's an important question. The science and the statistics say no. They say that people who come home from a life sentence are among the least likely to recidivate. That's just true.
But sometimes statistics are no match for the human spirit.
When the family comes consistently to these parole hearings, especially a family like the Salernos, doesn't that make it much more difficult for someone like Stephen Burns to get a chance at parole?
I would say yes. Yes, it does have an impact on the process.
The Salernos are praying they'll make an impact again this time.
Thank you for allowing us to be able to be a voice for Katina.
Harriet, Nina, her daughter Lexi, and a group of loyal friends head to the DA's office in Stockton, California, where they will attend the parole hearing via video, the post-COVID new normal. But won't hearing all this today make you relive everything?
It does. It really does. I am shaking. very shaky.
You are right now?
Yes. I'm afraid of him being released. I'm afraid that he'll come after us.
Harriet braces herself as she heads into the conference room, knowing she will have to again see the man who put her daughter in a grave.
Looking at Steve Burns when he walked in, he just looks dangerous. He acts dangerous. And what he says is dangerous.
48 Hours was not allowed to record video or audio during the hearing, but I was able to sit with the family and friends to observe. Stephen Burns, his affect flat, his voice monotone, once again denied he planned to kill Katina that night. This audio was recorded by the parole board.
But you didn't plan to kill her.
No.
And you deny that you threatened to kill her previously, correct?
Yes.
Do you understand why previous panels have found that you minimize what you did and your intentions?
Based on that, yes.
After almost 4 hours, the commissioners retreated to make their decision. Is this the hardest part, just waiting to see?
This is the most difficult part.
20 minutes later, the family was called back into the conference room. The decision was in.
Even after 45 years in prison, we see very little change on those issues that led you to murder Katina, that led you to do things in prison that offended others. We see very little change.
Stephen Burns was found unsuitable for parole.
I don't know. I
Go
think I just
home
went
and
in circles.
really sleep tonight.
This is the first real smile I've seen on your face.
Oh,
you did a great job, Mom. I'm very proud of you.
When Kevin Anderson, Stephen's friend from prison, read the transcript of the hearing, he was stunned. He sent 48 Hours an email, some of which I read to him when we spoke again after the hearing.
Reading this transcript is hurting my head, heart, and soul. This man is absolutely not ready to be released.
No. The way he came across in that hearing, he was absolutely not ready. All the work he has done, I didn't see it showing up there at all.
4 days after the hearing, Nina and Harriet went to deliver the news.
We got a 5-year denial, Dad, so I'm still holding strong to my promise to you.
It was Katina's 64th birthday.
Katina, it's the best birthday present I think we can give you was that denial. So thank you for watching over Mom and watching over everyone.
Happy birthday, Katina. I love you both so much and miss you.
Her former high school boyfriend viciously attacked her.
He is going to do this to another person.
A survivor speaks out for the first time.
He's more like a monster. I need to make sure he is put away for murder.
48 Hours is all new. CBS next Saturday, 10/9 Central, and streaming on Paramount+.
He was convicted of a monstrous act.
Eric Smith has served 28 years for the killing of 4-year-old Derek Roby in 1993.
We never forget our boy, 'cause he was, a wonderful child, and we miss him terribly. Yeah, a lot of people don't know the full gamut of what we go through, and nor should they.
Right.
I wouldn't wish this on anyone.
It's the first time I've ever let him go anywhere alone, and it was one block down the same side of the street.
When you have a family member that has been murdered, every time that inmate is up for parole, you relive, I think, what happened.
There are clearly people who make choices which reflect pure evil. In my view, this heads the list. The events of that morning of August 2nd, 1993.
Riding through the woods. He gave me a kiss, and I said, I love you. And he says, I love you, Mom. And he went hopping off the sidewalk.
At some point during the midday, I learned that a child was missing in the village of Savona, and consequently a search for Derek began. Late in the afternoon, the body of Derek Roby was found. It was just a brutal, brutal killing.
I've lost my boy. You know, we've lost him. He's gone.
Our instinct was to believe the killer was some adult, evil person.
Love you, Eric. Love you, Eric. Love you, honey. Love you. And it's another kid.
What do you think is going to happen?
So you find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree?
Yes.
Is that unanimous?
Yes.
Eric Smith was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison.
First time before the parole board, denied.
We knew the first one was coming, but then after that, we got to do this every 2 years.
For them, every 2 years must have felt like every 10 minutes.
Second time for the panel, denied.
It upsets me, the fact that we have to beg to keep this killer behind bars.
And you foresee the day when you would say, I don't care whether they let him out or not?
No, we'll take this pain to our grave.
That one, Daddy! 2006, parole denied. 2008, parole denied.
You can label me a monster, a cold-blooded killer, a demon child, Satan incarnate.
2010, parole denied. 2012, denied.
I don't care what the name you give me. Doesn't mean that that's who I am.
2014, 2016, 2018, denied, denied, denied.
I can live in society and function as any other normal individual.
Ooh, that last sentence was a chilling one. Another normal individual. Boy, is that a reach.
Parole granted.
Eric Smith, who gained national attention almost 3 decades ago for killing a 4-year-old, has been set free.
In Savona, there's one small grocery store on the main street. And all I could imagine was Doreen Roby standing in line at the checkout line and looking behind her and seeing the person who killed her son.
After being locked up for 28 years, Eric Smith, who at age 13 murdered a child, is now free.
He's out on parole here in Queens, New York. Smith insists he's a changed man, deserving of freedom, that he has a plan for a fresh start, even a fiancée. But others worry Eric Smith is still a flat-out threat. Dale and Doreen Roby feared this day would come. Our story begins with them.
Dan Rather covered the case for 48 hours when it first broke.
Atta girl, go, go!
In the summer of 1993, Derek Roby and his family lived just down the street from this park. It was, and still is, the social center of the small town of Savona, New York.
You're looking at me. Watch the ball, hon.
Dale Roby coached T-ball. It was his son Derek's favorite game.
Here you go. This one's for you, Mommy.
Good job, Deej.
Derek was all boy, all the time.
You know, he was going to get me a home run. And
Go, Deej!
he usually did.
He loved it. Derek also attended a recreation program here at the park, and Doreen Roby always watched as her son made the short trip. But one August morning, Derek's baby brother was crying, and Doreen Roby had her hands full.
Dalton was very fussy that morning, and Derek says, "It's okay, Mom, I'll go by myself. You know, it's no problem. The kids are probably going down the street."
Derek was nearly 5 and knew the route very well, so Doreen Roby allowed him to walk by himself. She packed his lunch and off he went.
He gave me a kiss, and I said, "I love you." He says, "I love you, Mom."
So he has only a block to go.
Mm-hmm.
No streets to cross.
No, it was a dead-end street. It's the first time I've ever let him go anywhere alone.
A short time later, as storm clouds moved in, Dory felt something close to panic.
I had an awful feeling.
It began to pour, and Doreen Roby had an overwhelming sense that something was wrong.
And I swear that that was the moment he died.
You believe that?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think that he was letting me know.
Derek was very close to us. If there was any way he could tell us he was leaving, he would have tried.
Doreen raced to the park to pick up Derek. She was told that he had never arrived. Nearly 5 hours later, searchers found Derek's body in a small patch of woods, just a few yards from the park and a few hundred yards from his own front door.
Blow kisses.
Derek had been choked and beaten to death with rocks. Neighbors placed a cross at the scene.
The biggest thing I remember was Go ahead.
That when you told your dad that you wouldn't be able to do the things that he did with you?
I got one. I got one. Dad, come here.
Keep reeling.
I got him.
Derek's first big fish. Yay!
The streets of Savona were empty as worried parents kept their children inside. The immediate assumption was that Derek Roby's killer was a stranger from out of town. That's what Eric Smith's grandfather believed.
When this terrible thing was done, I think everybody, including myself, thought it was an adult. And how could anybody do such a terrible, terrible thing?
Grandpa. Grandpa.
Yeah.
Eric Smith grew up just across town
Okay, Eric, let me see your stuff.
and liked to spend time with his grandparents, Red and Edie Wilson.
He always come in and give us hugs and kisses.
Hi.
Hi. He loved being a clown. He liked clowning around.
He definitely wanted to be paid attention to.
Yeah.
But Eric's bright red hair and freckles made him a target at school for years. And as a teenager, he was seen peddling around town for hours on end alone.
Why did he do it?
I don't know why he did it.
I asked him why he did it. His words almost verbatim were, "I don't know. I just saw this kid, this blonde kid, and I wanted to hurt him." It's hard to comprehend somebody doing what Eric Smith did.
On August 2nd, 1993, the body of Derek Roby was found in a small patch of woods, midway between the park where he was headed and his home.
He chose to end Derek Roby's life. And he chose to do it in a way that was much more than just killing.
Prosecutor John Tunney vividly remembers the crime scene and the brutality of the murder.
He could have simply killed Derek, but he chose not to simply kill Derek.
Directly behind us is the scene where the homicide occurred.
Charles Wood was lead investigator. The evidence showed that Derek was lured from the sidewalk and strangled. The killer's identity was then still unknown.
Then he discovered and dug up one very large rock and one smaller rock, and he battered Derek with those rocks. He went into Derek's lunch bag and he smashed a banana and took Derek's Kool-Aid, and he actually poured that Kool-Aid into the wounds that had been made by the large rocks. And he sodomized Derek with a small stick that he had found.
Lastly, the killer arranged Derek's body.
The left sneaker had been removed and was lying near Derek's right hand, and his right sneaker had been removed and was lying near Derek's left hand. It almost looked like the body had been posed in that position.
Eric continued to deal with Derek's body because he wanted to, because he chose to, and most frighteningly, because he enjoyed it.
The word enjoy, so disturbing in this context, would come up again and again in the course of the investigation. The very first time was 4 days after the murder, when Eric Smith walked into the police command center to see if he could be of help in solving the crime.
Totally enjoyed it. Totally enjoyed it. Didn't want it to end.
This is John Hipsch. He and other investigators repeatedly talked with Eric Smith and had no idea the killer was sitting right in front of them.
I mean, he's looking right at me. He's kind of hunched over a little bit, and he's very, very upbeat, very happy. He likes the fact that he's being talked to.
At first, Eric denied seeing Derek Roby, but then he abruptly changed his story.
He was right across the street from the open field, and that's where I saw Derek. And when he said that, he about knocked me off the chair. He's putting him right on top of the crime scene. I mean, you just got to walk across an open field and you're at the scene where the murder was. So we asked him, what was he wearing? And he went on, he said he had a white T-shirt on and he had this lunch bag in his hand. Can you tell me about the lunch bag? And he said, it was kind of cool, really.
Investigators pushed Eric to pinpoint where he last saw Derek.
And that's when he started to get emotional. His voice started cracking. He put his head down, and he brings his fist up, and his fists were vibrating a little bit, and he goes, "You think I killed him, don't you?" Myself and the other two investigators are just like, wow.
Eric asked to take a break, and his father brought him a glass of Kool-Aid.
Just as we get back into it again about where he'd seen Derek again, he grabs the red Kool-Aid and just throws it on the ground. Now, we all knew that Derek, the boy that was killed, had red Kool-Aid spilled all over him. I'm thinking that, this kid's seen something that's very, very traumatic, and there's a block in there, and I can't get around it.
The next day, investigators asked Eric to get his bike and show them where he was when he saw Derek Roby.
Okay, why don't you go up here and you start?
Investigator Wood was there, and as you can see from this police videotape, Eric looks calm as can be.
During the reenactment, I would have to say he enjoyed it. He was having a good time.
But it quickly became obvious that Eric could not have seen all that he described from the distance he claimed to be.
There was a discrepancy in Eric's story.
Red Wilson,
Grandpa.
Eric's grandfather,
Grandpa.
says the family knew Eric was hiding something.
In no way did we feel that he had done it. We felt that he knew something. Maybe somebody had threatened him. That's why he wouldn't tell.
"5 days after he was killed, Derek Roby was buried in his baseball uniform. Just 2 days later, his killer confessed.
I was there. I was there when my grandson confessed. And it was terrible.
Family members sat Eric down and begged him to tell what he knew. The truth was more terrible than they ever imagined.
And he just said what?
I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I killed that little boy. It's still hard to believe.
Love you, Eric.
Love you, Eric. Love you, Eric.
The question is, to me, why? How? How could take the life of a little boy?
All rise.
A year after Eric's confession, the question remains, what could possibly compel this child to kill another?
Does he know what he's done? Does he know it's wrong?
A stricken community is looking to this courtroom for an answer.
The evidence that you're going to hear in this case is going to be horrible.
Will the trial of Eric Smith put an end to the mystery that began on August 2nd, 1993, the last day of Derek Roby's short life?
All rise. County Court is now in session. The Honorable Donald G. Purple Jr. presiding.
The trial of the People versus Eric Smith is finally underway.
He was about that tall. He weighed 40 pounds.
Prosecuting attorney, John Tunney.
He lived 4 years and 10 months. And that person killed him. Eric Smith choked and battered the young life out of Derek Roby.
Look at Dad.
In New York State, murder is the one crime for which a 13-year-old can be tried in adult court.
You're a father of 5.
That's correct.
You must have thought about that. Must think about it in the context of trying a 13-year-old son of another family.
Yes, but you know where I first thought of it? Was when I looked at 4-year-old Derek Roby. The face of every one of my 5 children was superimposed on that child's body.
At the heart of this trial, the haunting question, why did Eric kill?
The fact is that Eric chose to do something horrible.
Defense attorney Kevin Bradley says there was no choice.
Eric Smith suffers from a very serious mental disease. To pick this up and throw this down on a little boy's head, does that suggest calm, deliberate action, a plan? You're going to hear testimony by people that say Eric just seemed like a normal child. And then the rage explodes.
It does not diminish the fact that he understood what he was doing.
Tunney says it's murder, plain and simple.
Eric analyzed the situation and chose to do it.
To help him with his case, Tunney will be calling on Derek's parents, Dale and Doreen Roby.
She has to personalize the tragedy, the loss, the terror, to bring Derek Roby, the person, into that courtroom. Describe Derek.
He was my cute little firecracker.
But bringing Derek Roby into the courtroom
He was my little t-ball player, a very good athlete.
is not going to be easy.
How did he get along with, interact with people?
Objection, Your Honor.
Derek participated in the recreation program. What was he participating in?
I'm going to object again at this point.
The judge agrees, and Doreen is not permitted to say much at all about Derek.
Go, Mommy, kiss.
I wish I would have gotten a chance to talk about Derek a little more. You know, it really wasn't fair that I didn't get to tell them what kind of kid he was.
It's time for the defense to present its case. Bradley begins by calling on 2 people who know more about Eric than anyone else. His mother, Tammy Smith, and his stepfather, Ted Smith.
County court is now reconvened.
The jury heard that as a toddler, Eric threw temper tantrums and banged his head on the floor. He had speech problems,
Leave me alone.
was held back in school, and relentlessly bullied.
He would say things like, I'm stupid, I'm nobody, I'm never gonna be anybody, that kind of stuff.
I remember him coming up to me in the kitchen. He was really upset, and he was crunching his fists and shaking, and told me that, he said, Dad, I need help. I feel like I want to hurt somebody. And he said, yes, I do. I want to hurt something.
At one point he turned and told me that he did it. I asked him why, and he just kept saying, I don't know, and he cried.
Defense psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Herman diagnosed Eric with intermittent explosive disorder, uncontrollable rage.
People who have this disorder describe feeling as if they're about to explode. After the episodic rage, the child may appear to be, quote, normal.
An expert for the prosecution disagreed with Dr. Herman's diagnosis.
It's a rare disorder, rarely seen at the age that Eric is. What do you think is going to happen?
And specialists from both sides subjected Eric to extensive medical testing. They examined brain function, hormone levels, and found nothing to explain his violent behavior. Because of the sexual nature of his crime, the question of whether Eric was abused was repeatedly raised at trial, but repeatedly denied.
Did he indicate to you generally and consistently that he had not been either physically or sexually abused?
Yes, he has always indicated that.
However, there was testimony that Eric's older sister, Stacy Hebner, was sexually abused by their stepfather.
He molested me. I'd want to know if he was molested. There had to have been something bothering him.
Still, there was absolutely no evidence that Ted Smith or anyone else sexually abused Eric.
Are there issues? Are there problems? Sure, but it does not regularly produce killers.
Did he know what he was doing? Did he know when he was strangling Derek that he was strangling a child? And if he knew that what he was doing was wrong, that he shouldn't have been doing it, then he can have every psychological, psychiatric problem in the world, and he's still responsible for what he did.
Under the law.
Under the law.
But what does the jury believe?
She thinks they have a verdict.
All rise. County court is now reconvened.
So you find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree?
Yes.
Is that unanimous?
Yes.
Eric's parents, Ted and Tammy Smith, were devastated, convinced their child was sick.
Take the young man in custody.
He would be sentenced to the maximum, 9 years to life in prison. The murdered boy's parents, Dale and Doreen Roby, cried with relief, not knowing that they were being sentenced too.
The Robys, they're serving a life sentence.
Mm-hmm. Every time that inmate is up for parole, they relive it. So it's just a nightmare for them.
It really felt like, at a certain point, why do we have to? Wasn't the crime enough?
Take the young man in custody.
When Eric Smith was sentenced, was there a sense, now we can get on with our lives?
You hear the 9 years to life. And I think back then, everybody was focusing on the life side of it.
Dale and Doreen Roby were relieved that the boy who murdered their beloved son was locked away.
We were still trying to get over our loss. Then I think we almost got settled in for a year or two. Then it hit us.
What hit them was the harsh reality that Derek's killer would one day be eligible for release. Eric Smith's first parole hearing was in 2002.
They could decide that, well, now he's done his time and we're going to let him go.
That scares the hell out of me.
The Robies weren't allowed inside the closed-door hearing, so they wrote letters and made home videos to remind the board about their
Come on, Derek, run!
devastating loss.
It upsets me, the fact that we have to beg to keep this killer behind bars.
Smith's parole was denied, but 2 years later, he was back before the board.
Hi, my name is Eric Smith. You first met me 11 years ago.
In 2004, Smith was 24 years old. This is a statement he read for our 48 Hours cameras.
I know my actions have caused a terrible loss in the Roby family, and for that I'm truly sorry.
I think that Eric Smith was incredibly troubled.
Leave me alone.
And I think that he was a dangerous young man.
Joni Johnston is a clinical forensic psychologist. For more than 20 years, she's been evaluating inmates who are up for parole.
When we're looking at a very inexact science, if you will, trying to predict whether somebody is dangerous, it's like balancing a scale. Are we willing to take a risk?
Johnston has never met Eric Smith, but we asked her to look at his case.
I don't see Eric Smith at all as a kid who snapped. I see him as a kid who escalated. From hurting animals starting at around age 11 and who eventually progressed to hurting a child.
She also read transcripts of his parole hearings.
2004 was really the most frightening. This is somebody who goes into a tremendous amount of detail in terms of what he did.
Back then, John Tunney shared some of what Smith told the parole board.
Question. You convinced him to go to this field. What did you do next? Answer, put my hands around him and strangled him.
All these years later, Eric Smith's words are still chilling.
When you were doing that, was that something that gave you a good feeling? Answer, at the moment, it did, yes.
Probably the most significant and frightening thing is this is the kid where the narrative seems to have been this kind of rage or this person's inability to control his anger. And yet the emotion he expresses is pleasure or enjoyment.
Question, why do you think that was? Answer, because of, instead of me being hurt, I was hurting somebody else. Growing up, I was always picked on, disrespected, made fun of. Eric was tired of being the victim in his mind, and he wanted to see what it felt like to be the victimizer.
There's a question, Mr. Smith. If you had not admitted to someone that you had done this, do you think it would have been a fair statement to say that you probably would have done it again? Answer, yes.
That confirmed Tunney's belief that Smith, at 13, was a budding serial killer.
I was afraid then, and frankly, as I sit here now, I think that Eric Smith may very well have done it again because it was such a positive experience for him.
It made him feel good.
He got a lot out of it. Had he not been identified, he wouldn't have paid a price.
The parole board's decision in 2004 was no surprise, but for the Robies, there was always another hearing looming.
Must have felt like a weight hanging right over your head.
Yes. There's all of these really happy times that are supposed to happen throughout your life, but there's always that.
We always got a letter about 3 or 4 months prior to that. Ours always fell around Christmas.
You know, here, putting the Christmas tree up and we're reading this letter that, here we go again. It just made me angry.
It's understandable that, they would never want me to be out in society.
This is Eric Smith in 2009, just months before his 5th parole hearing.
My anger wasn't directed at Derek at all. It was directed at all the other guys who used to pick on me. And When I was torturing and killing Derek, that was what I saw in my head.
Smith, almost 30, was interviewed by WENY-TV as he prepared to face the board.
The only thing that I can say to him is, I'm not the same person. There's not a day that goes by in some way, shape, or form that I'm like forced to remember what I did. I'm automatically thinking I killed Derek and the pain that I caused Dale and Doreen Roby.
The problem is, how sincere is it versus how contrived or calculated it is. I certainly can't tell as I sit here. You can't? No. For us to have any real hope, he has to be accurate when he says, you know, I'm different, I'm self-aware, and I have every reason in the world to behave.
It's not a question of does he believe it?
Right.
Is it true?
Is it accurate? Exactly.
I did kill Derek, and for that, you know, I am sorry, and there's nothing I can do to bring him back. I mean, if I could switch places with him and take the grave for him to live, I'd do it in a second.
Remorse is important, for sure.
Joni Johnston also wants to know if it's the truth, but cautions that expressions of remorse at a parole hearing can be difficult to judge.
Is it genuine remorse? Let me tell you, there is no psychological test. There is no face. There is no behavioral indicator of remorse. We don't really know if this remorse is real.
The parole board in 2010 turned him down again. But as the years passed, Johnston says Smith seemed to be changing.
You're starting to see some compassion from him for other people. So I'm seeing a little bit of hope from him.
Is Eric Smith growing, or is he simply refining his message?
I think both. Certainly parole boards have to always separate that out, which is why they're not just relying on what this inmate is saying in the parole hearing. You know, thank the Lord. They're going to be looking at all this person's history. What has this person done or not done in the 2 years since he's been here? They're looking at the parole interview as one piece of that puzzle.
But for the Robys, decades of endless parole hearings have taken a toll.
It's not fair that we have to keep doing this.
Did you ever lose the energy to keep going with this? I can't anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he would say, but we're doing it for him in his memory. And I'm like, you're right. And I know that some people probably think, geez, you should just get over this and move on. But any parent that has ever lost a child knows that you don't ever get over it.
On October 5th, 2021, 41-year-old Eric Smith went before the parole board for the 11th time.
You have somebody who's completed a ton of programs. He's got some more educational goals. His risk is low, according to risk assessments that have been done.
Smith even told them he was engaged. He says his fiancée was studying to be a lawyer and wrote him asking about the juvenile justice system. Over time, he says, they ended up falling in love.
Eric Smith at 13 is not the same person that he is at 31 or at 41. He has changed. We all changed. You kind of go, what else can he do to prove that he is no longer a danger to society? Now we're at the point where it becomes, is this about punishment or about rehabilitation?
Breaking news. The Savona man who killed a 4-year-old boy in 1993 has been granted parole.
Dale was at work when he heard the news he'd been dreading for so many years and called Doreen.
We found each other on the porch and gave each other a hug.
I have some sympathy for the people who are called upon to make that decision. And that's why I have such hope that they're right.
At the end of the day, still a little bit of a gamble.
Oh, no, it's a huge gamble. This parole decision is a high-risk enterprise, to be sure.
We are here as a community to stand together for justice for Derek Roby and Dale and Doreen Roby.
Weeks after Eric Smith was granted parole, dozens gathered in Savona to peacefully protest his release.
They wanted to remember Derek because all the attention was now on Eric being released, so they didn't want people to forget.
It was very touching.
Many in Savona feared Smith wanted to move back to live with his mother.
I wasn't so much worried about us as I was everybody else.
I just knew where a lot of the people in town, the village, stood.
You know, we don't want him here. They better not send him here.
And the parole board agreed. Smith's release was delayed for months until approved housing was found for him in Queens, New York, more than 200 miles away from Savona.
This is breaking news from News 8.
Eric Smith, who's been behind bars for nearly 3 decades, is no longer in prison.
And then, on February 1st, 2022, after being locked up for 28 years, Eric Smith quietly slipped out of Woodburn Correctional Facility, out of view of cameras, a free man.
I understand why, after so many years, they decided to give him a chance. And that's fine, you know, for him and his family.
It would begin a new chapter for the Robys, who had fought for so long to keep Smith in prison.
You know, he's been released, but in a way, so have we. No more parole. I can get on with our lives. Now the true healing can begin.
Doreen says part of the healing process has been letting go of her anger.
I would rather laugh than cry any day of the week. If you let it, it's going to eat you alive.
The anger.
Yes.
The Robys say they choose not to think about Eric Smith, but instead focus on friends and family, especially their son Dalton, now 30.
You have to find the joy in life. You have to enjoy each other because life is way too short. And just live.
August 2nd, the day we lost him, we always try to go do something fun. White ice cream with sprinkles. That's what Derek called vanilla, so we try to do a...
Wherever we are, we have to go we have to go find ice cream.
Even though it's sad, it's happy. You know?
As for Eric Smith, since his release, we've been unable to contact him. But in 2009, he told WENY-TV he had big plans for his future.
I want to, get married, raise a family, hold down, a job, pursue the American dream.
He also said he wanted to counsel kids who've been bullied, just like he had been.
The question is, will Eric Smith be a success story or somebody that we're pointing to and saying, system blew it with that one?
That's exactly right. I keep going back to my hope. Time will tell.
Back in the summer of 1993, to honor Derek Roby, volunteers, including Eric Smith's great-grandfather, bulldozed the scene of the crime and put in a new ball field in memory of the little T-ball player.
Watch the ball, hon.
Today, up on the hill, watching over the field, is a statue of Derek. It was sculpted by Doreen's uncle and funded by people from all over the country.
Dedicated to be a gentle reminder of what childhood is meant to be. Derek J. Roby.
I love that he's the only person in town that has a statue. A lot of people called him the mayor of Savona because he was
busy on the corner.
He was pretty well known.
At 4 years and 10 months?
Yes. He was so much fun. He just was a great kid.
"48 Hours. Don't miss an episode."